Nari pressed her back against the cold metal wall and held her breath. She could hear his footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, steady, the footsteps of a human. Her hearts beat fast inside her chest. Yes, she had two hearts like all Velorans, and right now both of them were filled with fear. The footsteps passed by her door and continued down the hallway. She let out a slow breath and felt her body relax. He had not come for her. Not yet. 3 months. She had lived in this dwelling for 3 months now. 90 days of hiding in corners. 90 days of watching and waiting. 90 days of being the wife of a human she had never wanted to marry. Nari moved to the small window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, far beyond this space station, her home planet was dying. The Veloran people were running out of food, out of water, out of hope. The only thing that could save them was an alliance with the Human Federation, and the price of that alliance was her. She was a gift, a living treaty, a bride for a human soldier. When the elders had told her about the arrangement, Nari had wanted to scream. She had wanted to run. But where could she go? Her people needed this alliance to survive. And so she had walked onto the human ship with her head down and her fear hidden deep inside her chest. The human they gave her to was called Jihoon. He was tall, with dark hair and quiet eyes. He did not smile when he first saw her. He only nodded and said, "Welcome." That was all, just one word. Nari had expected violence. Among her people, humans were known as the most dangerous species in the galaxy. They were warriors who had conquered star systems. They were predators who killed without mercy. The stories said that humans enjoyed causing pain. The stories said that humans took alien brides as trophies, as prizes to show their power. But Jihoon did not hurt her. Not on the first day, not on the second, not in all the 90 days that followed. Instead, he gave her the largest room in his dwelling. It had a soft bed and a window that showed the stars. He told her it was hers and that he would not enter without her permission. He slept on a thin mat near the front door. Nari did not understand why. The mat looked uncomfortable. The floor was hard and cold, but every night that was where he slept, far away from her. At first, Nari thought it was a trick. She thought he was waiting for her to let down her guard. She thought he was playing some cruel game that humans like to play. So she stayed in her room and only came out when she had to. But the days passed, and nothing bad happened. Jihoon cooked meals for her. Strange meals that she had never seen before. But he had clearly studied what Velorans could eat, because the food was always safe for her body. He left the plates outside her door and walked away without saying anything. Nari would wait until his footsteps faded, then open the door and take the food inside. She ate alone, in silence, wondering what he wanted from her. One evening she came out of her room to get water. She thought Jihoon was asleep, but he was sitting at the table with a small device in his hands. Strange sounds came from the device, sounds that seemed familiar. Nari froze in the doorway. Jihoon looked up and saw her. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then he held up the device and said, "I am trying to learn your language, but it is very difficult." Nari did not know what to say. She stood there, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes wide. Jihoon set down the device and stood up slowly. He always moved slowly around her, she had noticed, like he was trying not to scare her. "I know you are afraid of me," he said. His voice was low and calm. "I know what your people say about humans. I am sorry that you were forced to come here. I did not ask for a wife. I only asked for peace between our peoples." Nari swallowed hard. "Then why did you accept me?" "Because if I did not, they would have given you to someone else, someone who might not have been kind." He paused and looked at the floor. "I thought maybe I could give you a safe place, even if you never stopped being afraid of me." He turned and walked back to his mat near the door. He lay down with his back to her and said nothing more. Nari got her water and returned to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed and held the cup in her trembling hands. She thought about what he had said. She thought about the meals he cooked. She thought about the mat on the floor and the room he had given her. None of it made sense. This was not how humans were supposed to behave. This was not the monster from the stories. The next morning, Nari woke up early. She moved quietly through the dwelling and found Jihoon already awake. He was in the small kitchen preparing food. When he saw her, he stepped back to give her space. "Good morning," he said. "Are you hungry?" Nari nodded slowly. For the first time, she did not run back to her room. She sat down at the table and waited. Jihoon brought her a plate of food. It was a simple meal, some kind of grain and vegetables that Velorans could digest safely. He set it in front of her and then moved to the other side of the room. "You do not have to eat with me," he said. "I know you prefer to be alone." "No," Nari heard herself say. "You can sit." Jihoon looked surprised, but he nodded and sat down across from her, keeping the table between them like a wall. They ate in silence. It was strange and uncomfortable, but it was also something new, something different. When the meal was finished, Nari looked at him and asked, "Why are you learning my language?" Jihoon thought for a moment before answering. "Because you are far from home, because everything here must feel strange and frightening. I thought maybe, if I could speak to you in your own words, it would feel a little less lonely." Nari felt something shift inside her chest. It was small, like a crack in a wall, not enough to break through, but enough to let a tiny bit of light inside. She did not say thank you. She was not ready for that, but she did not run away either. That night when Jihoon lay down on his mat, Nari left her door open just a little bit. It was not much, just a crack, but it was the first time she had done that since arriving. And in that small gesture, something began to change. The sickness came without warning. Nari woke up one morning and her body felt wrong. Her skin, which usually glowed with a soft silver light, had turned pale and dull. Her arms and legs felt heavy, like they were filled with stones. When she tried to stand, the room spun around her and she fell back onto the bed. She knew what this was. Every Veloran knew. It was called the Pale Withering, a disease that sometimes struck her people when they were far from their home planet. Something about being away from Veloran soil and Veloran air made the body forget how to work properly. On her home world, those who caught this sickness were often left to die. Medicine was scarce. Resources were precious. The weak were considered burdens that the community could not afford to carry. If someone caught the Pale Withering, their family would say goodbye and let them fade away. Nari lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. So this was how it would end. Far from home, in the dwelling of a human who had no reason to care about her. She would grow weaker and weaker until her two hearts stopped beating. She closed her eyes and waited for death. But death did not come. Instead, the door opened and Jihoon walked in. Nari tried to tell him to go away. She tried to tell him not to waste his time, but her voice was too weak to make any sound. Jihoon took one look at her and his face changed. The calm expression he always wore disappeared. Something else took its place. Something sharp and focused, like a blade being drawn. He moved fast, faster than Nari had ever seen him move. He lifted her from the bed as gently as if she were made of glass, and he carried her out of the room and down the corridor to a small medical bay she had never entered before. He laid her on a bed and started pressing buttons on machines. Lights blinked, screens lit up. Strange devices began to hum and beep. "What is wrong with you?" he asked. His voice was steady, but Nari could see worry in his eyes. "Tell me the name. I need to know what this is." "Pale Withering," she whispered. It took all her strength to say those two words. Jihoon nodded and turned to a computer screen. His fingers moved quickly across the controls. Nari watched him through half-closed eyes. She wanted to tell him not to bother. She wanted to tell him that there was no cure, that Veloran simply accepted this death when it came. But she was too tired to speak. For the next 7 days, Jihoon did not sleep. Nari drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was awake and could see him moving around the medical bay. Sometimes she was lost in dark dreams where she heard voices from her childhood. But every time she opened her eyes, Jihoon was there. He researched Veloran biology on the computer network. He contacted medical experts across the galaxy. He traded away things he owned to buy medicines and compounds that might help her. Nari saw him give away his military medals, his father's watch, everything of value he possessed. When the medicines arrived, he prepared them carefully and gave them to her through a machine attached to her arm. He checked her vital signs every hour. He adjusted the temperature of the room to match what Veloran bodies needed. When her fever rose so high that she began to shake, he sat beside her and pressed cool cloths to her forehead. He held her hand and talked to her in broken Veloran, reading from his translation device. "Stay with me," he said in her language. The words were clumsy and wrong, but she understood them. "Do not give up, keep fighting." On the fourth day, Nari was so weak that she could not open her eyes. She could feel her body failing. Her two hearts were beating slower and slower. She thought this was the end. But then she felt something warm against her hand, fingers wrapped around hers. A voice spoke close to her ear. "I am not going to let you die," Jihoon said. "I know you think you are alone. I know you think no one cares, but you are wrong. I care, and I will not stop fighting for you." Those words reached somewhere deep inside Nari, somewhere she had forgotten existed. On her home world, no one fought for the sick. No one stayed awake for 7 days trying to save someone who was supposed to die. But this human did. On the 7th day, Nari's fever broke. She opened her eyes and saw the medical bay clearly for the first time. Sunlight from an artificial lamp warmed her face. The machines around her beeped softly with steady rhythms. She turned her head and saw Jihoon. He was collapsed in a chair beside her bed. His head was tilted back at an uncomfortable angle. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled and stained. He looked like he had not eaten or slept in days. But his hand was still holding hers. Nari stared at him for a long time. She looked at his exhausted face, at the way his chest rose and fell with tired breaths. She thought about all the meals he had cooked for her. She thought about the mat on the floor and the room he had given her. She thought about the words he had spoken in her language. And she felt something break inside her chest. Not a bad break, a good one, like a wall falling down to let light through. No one had ever fought for her before. Her own people would have let her die. Her own family would have said goodbye and walked away. But this human, this stranger who owed her nothing, had stayed awake for 7 days to keep her alive. She did not understand it. She could not explain it. But she felt it deep in her two hearts. Jihoon's eyes opened slowly. He blinked a few times and then saw that she was awake. A tired smile crossed his face. "You made it," he said. His voice was rough and dry. "Welcome back." Nari opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could she say? How could she thank someone for giving her life when she had expected only death? Jihoon seemed to understand. He squeezed her hand gently and said, "You do not have to say anything, just rest. Get your strength back. That is all I want." He closed his eyes and fell back asleep in the chair, still holding her hand. Nari lay there in the quiet medical bay, listening to the beeping machines and feeling the warmth of his fingers against hers. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she did not wipe them away. For the first time since leaving Velora, she did not feel afraid. She felt something else entirely, something strange and new, something that had no name in her language or in his. But whatever it was, it felt like hope. The days after her recovery were different. Everything was different. Nari no longer hid in her room. She no longer flinched when Jihoon entered a room. She no longer counted his footsteps or held her breath when he walked past her door. The fear that had lived inside her for so long was still there, but it was smaller now. quieter, like an old wound that had finally started to heal. She began to watch Jihoon more carefully, not with fear but with curiosity. She wanted to understand this strange human who had saved her life. The first thing she noticed was how gentle he was. He always knocked before entering any room, even the kitchen. He moved slowly around her like he was afraid of startling a small animal. When he spoke, his voice was soft and calm. He never raised it, not even when he was frustrated or tired. One morning, Nari came out of her room and found Jihoon standing near the window. He was looking out at the stars with a sad expression on his face. She almost went back to her room, but something made her stop. Something made her walk over and stand beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Jihoon turned to look at her. He seemed surprised that she had asked. For a moment he said nothing. Then he pointed out the window at a distant star. "That is the direction of Earth," he said. "My home planet. I have not been there in many years." "Do you miss it?" "Yes, sometimes." He paused and looked back at the star. "There was a place I loved there. It was called an ocean, a great body of water that stretched as far as you could see. The waves would crash against the shore and the sound was like music." Nari tried to imagine it. On Velora, water was precious and rare. The idea of enough water to fill a horizon seemed impossible. "What else do you miss?" she asked. Jihoon smiled a little. It was the first real smile she had ever seen on his face. "The trees," he said. "Earth has many kinds of trees. Some of them grow so tall that they block out the sun. Some of them change colors when the seasons change, red and gold and orange like fire." "That sounds beautiful." It was. He looked at her. "What do you miss about Velora?" The question surprised Nari. No one had ever asked her that before. She thought for a long moment, searching through her memories. "The sky," she finally said. "The Veloran sky has 3 moons. When they all rise together, the night turns silver. My mother used to take me outside to watch them." Jihoon nodded. 3 moons. I would like to see that someday." They stood together by the window for a while longer, not speaking. But the silence was comfortable now. It did not feel empty or cold. It felt like something shared. After that day, Nari began to spend more time outside her room. She ate her meals at the table with Jihoon instead of hiding in her chamber. She asked him questions about Earth and about humans and about his life before she came. Jihoon answered every question patiently. He told her about human customs. He explained what a birthday was and why humans celebrated it. He described something called music, and when Nari did not understand, he played a song for her on his computer. The sound was strange and beautiful. It made Nari feel things she could not name. When the song ended, she asked him to play another one, and another. They sat together for hours, listening to human music while the stars turned slowly outside the window. One evening, Jihoon came home with something in his hands. It was a small flower, blue and delicate, with petals that curved like tiny cups. "I found this in the station greenhouse," he said. "The color reminded me of Veloran skin. I thought you might like it." Nari took the flower and held it carefully. It was so small and fragile. She brought it to her nose and breathed in its scent. "Thank you," she said, and she meant it. Jihoon smiled and walked away, without asking for anything in return. The next day, Nari found a small stone on her pillow. It was smooth and round, with swirls of silver and blue running through it. She knew Jihoon must have left it there. When she asked him about it, he shrugged and said, "The colors looked like Veloran moons." These small gifts kept coming. A flower one day, a stone the next, a piece of sweet food that humans called chocolate, a picture of an Earth ocean printed on paper. Nari kept every single one. She arranged them on a shelf in her room and looked at them every night before she slept. Each gift was proof that someone was thinking about her. Someone cared enough to notice what she might like. One night Nari found Jihoon sitting alone in the kitchen. His translation device was in his hands, and he was practicing Veloran words out loud. His pronunciation was terrible. He made mistakes with almost every word, but he kept trying, repeating each phrase over and over again. Nari sat down across from him. "Would you like help?" she asked. Jihoon looked up. His eyes widened with surprise, but then he smiled. "Yes, please, I am not very good at this." They practiced together for hours. Nari corrected his mistakes gently. She taught him how to shape his mouth to make the sounds properly. She laughed when he mispronounced words in funny ways, and Jihoon laughed too. It was the first time she had laughed since leaving Velora. Later that night, when they had finished practicing, Nari looked at Jihoon and asked the question that had been living inside her for weeks. "Why do you try so hard for me? I was given to you like property. I am not your real wife. I am just a treaty. Why do you care?" Jihoon was quiet for a long time. He looked down at his hands, then back up at her face. "Because you deserve someone who tries," he said. "You did not choose to come here. You did not choose me, but none of that changes who you are. You are a person, not a treaty, and every person deserves to be treated with kindness." He stood up and walked toward his mat by the door. Before he lay down, he turned and looked at her one more time. "Fear does not erase that," he said. "Nothing erases that." Nari sat alone in the kitchen for a long time after he fell asleep. She thought about his words. She thought about the flower and the stone and the chocolate. She thought about the 7 days he had stayed awake to save her life. And she realized something important. She was not afraid of him anymore, not even a little bit. Somewhere along the way, without her noticing, the fear had disappeared, and in its place, something else had started to grow, something warm and strange and wonderful. She did not know what to call it yet, but she knew she wanted to find out. The attack came at night, when the station was quiet and the lights were dim. Nari was asleep in her room when she heard the front door crash open. The sound was loud and violent, like a thunderclap inside the dwelling. She sat up in bed, her 2 hearts pounding with sudden fear. Voices, strange voices, speaking in rough human language. "Find the alien, she is somewhere inside." Nari's blood turned cold. She knew what this was. She had heard rumors on the station about humans who did not accept the alliance, humans who thought Velorans were beneath them, humans who wanted the treaty to fail. They had come for her. She heard Jihoon's voice, calm but hard. "You are not welcome here, leave now." "Step aside, soldier. This is not your concern. We are here for the alien." "She is my wife. That makes her my concern." A bitter laugh. "Your wife? She is nothing but a political tool, a piece of alien trash that should have stayed on her dying planet. The Federation made a mistake accepting this alliance, and we are here to correct it." Nari crept to her door and opened it just a crack. She could see the main room from here. 3 men stood inside, all wearing dark clothes. They carried weapons, energy blades that glowed with a sickly green light. Jihoon stood between them and the hallway that led to her room. He had no weapon. He was still wearing the simple clothes he slept in, but something about him had changed. The gentle, quiet man Nari had come to know was gone. In his place stood something else, something dangerous. His eyes were cold and focused. His body was still, but coiled like a spring ready to snap. He looked like a different person entirely. He looked like the monster from the Veloran stories. "Last chance," one of the men said. "Move aside or die with her." Jihoon did not move. "You will not touch her." The men attacked. What happened next was almost too fast for Nari to follow. The first man swung his blade at Jihoon's head. Jihoon ducked under it and drove his elbow into the man's throat. The man fell back, choking. The second man came from the side. Jihoon grabbed his weapon arm, twisted it until something cracked, and threw him into the wall. The man hit hard and did not get up. The third man was smarter. He hung back and waited for an opening. When Jihoon turned to face him, the man lunged forward with his blade. Jihoon caught the blade on his arm. Nari saw the green light cut through flesh. She saw blood spray across the floor, but Jihoon did not cry out. He did not fall back. Instead, he grabbed the man's face with his other hand and slammed his head into the floor. Once, twice, 3 times. The man stopped moving. Silence filled the dwelling. Jihoon stood alone among the fallen bodies, breathing hard. Blood dripped from the wound on his arm and pooled on the floor. Nari pushed open her door and ran toward him. Jihoon. He turned to look at her. The cold hardness in his eyes faded when he saw her face. For a moment, he was the gentle man she knew again. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, but you are bleeding. You need help." Jihoon looked down at his arm like he had forgotten about the wound. "It is not bad. I have had worse." But even as he spoke, his face grew pale. His legs began to shake. The blade had cut deeper than he realized, too deep. He took 1 step toward her, then another. On the 3rd step, his legs gave out and he collapsed. Nari caught him before he hit the floor. He was heavy, so much heavier than she expected. But she held on. She would not let him fall. "Stay with me," she said, the same words he had spoken to her during her illness. "Do not give up, keep fighting." She half carried, half dragged him to the medical bay. Her arms burned with effort. Her lungs screamed for air. But she did not stop. She could not stop. In the medical bay, she laid him on the bed and looked at the machines around her. She did not know how to use most of them. But Jihoon had taught her some things during her recovery. He had shown her how to clean wounds and apply bandages. He had explained how the medicine machine worked. She would have to learn the rest. For the next 3 days, Nari did not leave Jihoon's side. She cleaned his wound and changed his bandages. She figured out how to use the machines by reading the instructions on the screens. She gave him medicine and checked his vital signs and talked to him even when he could not hear her. "You foolish human," she whispered as she worked. "You impossible, stubborn, foolish human. Why did you do that? Why did you risk your life for me?" But she already knew the answer. He had told her once in his quiet way, because she deserved someone who tried, because every person deserved to be treated with kindness, because fear did not erase that. On the 2nd night, Jihoon's fever rose dangerously high. Nari pressed cool cloths to his forehead, just as he had done for her. She held his hand and told him stories about Velora. She described the 3 moons and the silver sky. She told him about her mother and her childhood, and all the things she had never told anyone before. "You have to live," she said. "You have to get better, because I need to tell you something, something important. But I cannot tell you if you are not awake to hear it." On the 3rd day, the fever broke. Jihoon opened his eyes and looked up at her. His face was pale and tired, but his eyes were clear. "Nari," he said, his voice was rough and weak, "you stayed." "Of course I stayed." She squeezed his hand tightly. "Did you think I would leave you, after everything you did for me?" A small smile crossed his face. "You should have run. You should have escaped while you could." "No," Nari shook her head firmly. "Running is what I used to do, before I met you, before I learned what it means to care about someone." Jihoon closed his eyes. For a moment, Nari thought he had fallen asleep again. But then he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I was afraid," he said. "When they came for you, I was so afraid I would lose you." Nari felt tears burning in her eyes. "You almost died protecting me." "I would do it again." He opened his eyes and looked at her. 100 times, 1,000 times, as many times as it takes. Nari leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. It was a Veloran gesture, one that her people used to show deep affection. She had never done it with anyone before. "Then we will protect each other," she said. "From now on, together." Jihoon's hand came up to touch her face. His fingers were gentle, just like always. "Together," he agreed. And in that moment, in the quiet medical bay surrounded by beeping machines and artificial light, Nari knew that everything had changed. She was no longer a prisoner or a treaty or a gift. She was something else now. She was his and he was hers. Not because anyone had forced them to be, but because they had chosen it. The days after the attack were quiet. The men who had come for Nari were taken away by station security. Officials from the Human Federation visited to apologize and promise better protection, but Nari barely paid attention to any of it. All she cared about was Jihoon. She stayed by his side as he healed. She brought him food and water. She helped him walk when he was strong enough to stand. She read to him from books she found on his computer, stories about Earth and humans and 100 different worlds she had never seen. And they talked. For hours and hours they talked. Jihoon told her about his life before she came. He had been a military medic, a soldier who healed instead of killed. He had served in many conflicts across the galaxy, saving lives wherever he went. But the violence had worn him down. He had seen too much death, too much pain. When the chance came to retire to a quiet station, he had taken it. "I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone," he said one evening. They were sitting together by the window, watching the stars turn slowly in the darkness. "I thought I would just fade away here, forgotten by everyone." "But then I came," Nari said. "Yes, then you came." He looked at her with soft eyes, and everything changed. Nari thought about her own journey. She thought about the fear she had carried for so long. She thought about the walls she had built around her heart to protect herself from pain. Those walls were gone now. Jihoon had torn them down, not with force but with patience and kindness and love. Yes, love. She could finally call it what it was. "I need to tell you something," she said. Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not look away from his face. Jihoon waited in silence. He was always patient, always willing to give her time. "When I first came here, I thought I was going to die." Nari spoke slowly, choosing her words carefully. "Not physically, but inside. I thought the Nari I used to be would disappear forever, replaced by a scared creature who only knew how to hide and survive." She paused and took a deep breath. "But you did not let that happen. You saw me when I was invisible. You cared for me when no one else would. You fought for me when I had given up on myself." She reached out and took his hand. "You taught me that kindness still exists in this universe, that not everyone takes, some people give." Jihoon's fingers tightened around hers. "Nari, let me finish." She smiled through the tears that had started to fall. "I do not want to go back to Velora. I know the Alliance says I can return once the treaty is secure, but I do not want to leave. I want to stay here, with you." "Because of the treaty?" "No," Nari shook her head firmly. "Not because of the treaty, because of you. Because somewhere between your quiet kindness and your stubborn refusal to give up on me, I stopped being afraid. I stopped being alone, and I started to feel something I have never felt before." She lifted his hand and pressed it against her chest, where her two hearts beat beneath the silver skin. "I love you," she said. "Not as a treaty wife, not as a political arrangement. I love you as Nari loves Jihoon, nothing more and nothing less." Jihoon was quiet for a long moment. His eyes searched her face, looking for something. Whatever he found there seemed to answer his questions, because slowly, carefully, he smiled. "I have been wanting to say those words to you for a long time," he said, "but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid that you would think I was taking advantage, that you would feel trapped. I never wanted you to stay because you thought you had to. I only wanted you to stay if you truly wanted to." Nari laughed. It was a real laugh full of joy and relief. "You foolish human, you wonderful, impossible, foolish human. How could I not want to stay with you?" Jihoon reached up and touched her face. His palm was warm against her cheek. "Then stay," he said. "Not as a treaty, not as an arrangement. Stay as my partner, my equal, my love." "Yes," the word came out without hesitation. "Yes, I will stay." Jihoon leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, copying the Veloran gesture she had shown him. His breath was warm on her skin, his heart beat close to hers. "I love you too," he whispered. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you standing in my doorway, terrified and alone. I loved you when you hid from me. I loved you when you were sick. I loved you every single day, even when you could not see it." They sat together in the quiet room, foreheads touching, hearts beating in time. Outside the window, the stars continued their endless dance. Ships passed in the distance, carrying travelers to 1,000 different worlds. But none of that mattered to Nari. The whole universe could have disappeared, and she would not have noticed, because everything she needed was right here, in this room, in this moment. She had come to this station as a prisoner. She had arrived in chains of fear and duty. She had expected suffering and pain and loneliness. Instead, she had found home. Not a place, not a planet, not a building or a room. Home was the gentle man sitting beside her. Home was the hand holding hers. Home was the love that had grown between them like a flower pushing through stone. "What happens now?" she asked. Jihoon smiled. "Whatever we want, we are not prisoners anymore. We are not pawns in someone else's game. We are free." "Free," Nari repeated. The word felt strange on her tongue. She had never been free before. Not really. There had always been someone telling her what to do, where to go, who to be. But now there was only Jihoon, and Jihoon only wanted her to be herself. "I want to see Earth someday," she said. "I want to see the ocean you told me about, and the trees that change color. Then we will go. When my work here is done, we will travel to Earth together. I will show you everything. The oceans and the mountains and the forests, the cities where millions of humans live, the quiet places where no one goes. And I will show you Velora," Nari said. "When my people have recovered, when the Alliance has made them strong again, I will take you to see the 3 moons rise together." "I would like that." Jihoon squeezed her hand. "I would like that very much." They sat together until the artificial night gave way to artificial morning. They talked about the future, about all the places they would go and all the things they would see. They made plans and shared dreams and built a life together, word by word, hope by hope. And when the morning light filled the room, Nari looked at the man beside her and felt something she had forgotten existed. Peace. She was not afraid anymore. She was not alone. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, with exactly the person she was supposed to be with. The universe was vast and dark and full of danger, but it was also full of wonder, full of kindness, full of love that could bridge any distance and heal any wound. Nari had learned that lesson the hard way. She had learned it through fear and sickness and violence, but she had learned it, and she would never forget. Some humans were monsters, but some humans were miracles. And she had found her miracle. She had found Jihoon. And together they had found home.